Shalom Israel, first and foremost, I do give all praises, all honor, and all glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem HaKadosh, to the apostles, and else great meals for teaching us his true peace and blessings to the whole of Israel. Yahweh is the name of the unfounded Hebrew, Ba'ashem is the name, and Yahweh Shai is the name of the begotten Son. Background lesson, and as the title, we're going to be going to these underground cities / bunkers that these devils have, and that they'll especially be fleeing to come to these last days, which you get within multiple scriptures, where you're going to have these devils flee to these, bunkers, these caves and, all these different things. Which, when you get a little bit right here, it says, new claim says underground cities are waiting for the apocalypse. And I always like to reference this one article, which I went into, a while back, made a couple lessons, diving into where they have spent $500 million training soldiers, deep underground. And that article was, I believe, 8 or 9 years old. So you can imagine, the things that they have now. And you can also, or why do you think, they would be, training these soldiers, deep underground? Because you can also get in Jeremiah 16:16. Very soon, the Lord's going to turn those fishers, which are the prophets, into those hunters. You're going to have these, these heathens be, gathered from these underground cities and these caves and these bunkers that they have and that they're going to try to flee to. So that's a point I do want to be, going to, throughout the lesson. So the Elba Matzakba make a lesson, going into this. But get real quick, get a couple scriptures, not be too long of a lesson. It says the kings of the earth will hide themselves, and you quite literally have a scripture that goes into that in Revelation, the 6th chapter. So let's read a bit more into this, and we get those scriptures. Now, in tonight's podcast, we discuss the recent claim by a former government official that the U.S. had built a secret underground city. And this is, nothing new. There also has been, many videos surfacing of these underground tunnels, and that these truckers will especially, go through in order to, transport goods, especially to these bunkers and underground cities that they have. You can find, multiple, videos of things like that. But it says, has built a secret underground city costing $21 trillion, where the ultra wealthy can hide out during a near extinction event. And you're going to have these devils, especially speaking of the elite of Esau, Edom, trying to flee and try to hide, trying to escape their judgment, but they will not be able to. As you have that saying, you can run, but you can't hide. Well, in this case, you can't run and you can't hide. Scripts going to how you can't hide from the Lord. But it says, costing $21 trillion, where the ultra wealthy can hide out during a near extinction event. We also discussed a recent report that a secretive underground FEMA base where congressional leaders hid following the 9/11 attacks is getting an upgrade, and that purpose is confidential. Are world leaders, including the elite, preparing for some major event that the general public is being left in the dark about? And to the average Joe, they have no clue with what's getting ready to unfold, what's getting ready to take place. Especially this devil getting ready to, usher in his plans, order out of chaos. So, they're definitely going to be, under those bunkers and these, bases that they have, sitting comfortably. But very soon they're going to be pulled out of them, Which we're going to get, scripts going to that. Now it says, for some major event that the general public is being left in the dark about, and these devils ultimately, trying to escape their judgment, and trying to hide away. And I said, how does this fit into Bible prophecy? We cover all of this in tonight's segment. And we're going to go into Bible prophecy right now. But this is the book of Amos, chapter 9 and 2 through verse 3. And this is one of the main points. Now it says, though they dig into hell, so deep underground, then shall mine hand take them. Though they climb to heaven, thence will I bring them down. Because they also have these space stations that they got. And it says, though they dig into hell, then shall mine hand take them. Though they climb to heaven, thence will I bring them down. And I always like to bring up the point, which actually I'll go into after I read verse 3. And though they hide themselves on top of Carmel, dealing with these mountains. I will search and take them out thence. And they'll be hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea. So they're going to be, fleeing to these, caves, these bunkers, these underground cities / bases, that they have. And those that hide themselves atop of Carmel, I'll search and take out thence, and though they be hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea, thence will I command the serpent, and he shall bite them. They also have these, super luxurious, submarines that they can, go to, that they, can stay underwater for however long. Those are things that they also got. But this right here says, though they be hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea, thence will I command the serpent, and he shall bite them. And you can get in these scriptures, Leviathan is going to be, let loose, come to these last days. So the Lord's going to sick Leviathan onto them. And just going back to that point I was wanting to make, the Lord has covered all routes of escape via land, via sea, and via air. There is quite literally nowhere you can go. But that's this devil's, thought process. He's going to be able to escape the wrath, the judgment from the Lord. You can't escape the wrath, the Lord, man. This is Revelation 6 and 13 through 17, as we are especially going to prophecy. What is written will come to pass and will play out. So Revelation 6 and 13 through 17, as I brought up the point earlier, now it says, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree cast her until the fig tree is shaken of a mighty wind. So this is their judgment that they're going to try to escape. And what are those stars that have been speaking of? Falling to the earth. Those thermonuclear missiles, which you can also get Isaiah 34. It says, the Lord's sword is bathed in heaven. You can get Jeremiah 50. 9 going to those arrows being shot, as well as 2nd Ezra being shot from one end of the earth into the whole other side. So going to show it's not speaking of a regular bow and arrow. But all of it's, speaking of the same thing. Those thermonuclear missiles. And now it says, and the heaven depart as a scroll when it's brought together, not speaking of the mushroom cloud being formed from those explosions, and every mountain and island removed out of their places. And you're going to have the earth quite literally shake. And you get various scriptures, especially going to that, I was going to shake as a drunkard, as a cottage. But verse 15 is the main point, and going back to what we just read. Which actually I do want to read that one more time just before we finish that. And that says, the kings of the earth will hide themselves. And you can see in the background, there's a bunch of Edomites in suits. What's in that last article I spoke or referenced earlier was over 9 to 8+ years ago. Spending $500 million training soldiers deep underground. So you can imagine the things that they have now. And what's that about the point? What else do you think they're especially training these soldiers? And we're gonna further go into that in Jeremiah 16:16, but this is the main point I want right here. Verse 15, the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, every bondman, every freeman, hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains. And as we just went into dealing with that article, they have these underground cities, these underground bunkers, these DUMBs, which is short for deep underground military bases. They have these things. You have YouTube videos showcasing, a few of these underground bunkers. That they will be to live down there, for a good while, but you won't be able to, because you can look into many of those videos. You have tons of food, goods stored. Where they're speak too fast, like it. Where they're able to last a couple of years, and you get the gist. But it says, in the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every freeman hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains. Further going to that point, verse 16, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the wrath, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. So they're going to try to escape their judgment, trying to flee away. They're gonna try to go to the sea, underground and these space stations, but you can't hide from the Lord. And you will get your judgment, man. You're gonna pay for all the atrocities that you have committed, things that you have done. And now let's get verse 17. For the great day of his wrath is coming, and who shall be able to stand? And to further go into that in Jeremiah 16:16, because I brought up the point earlier, Yahweh Hashem has covered all routes of escape. Via land, air, and sea. And it says, behold, I'll send for many fishers, saith the Lord. Now, who are those fishers? The prophets, the men of the Lord. And they shall fish them, and after will I send for many hunters. So very soon those fishers will be turned into those hunters, man. As you especially get in Isaiah 59:19, we're going to have that standard being lifted against our enemy, and power will be bestowed upon the Lord's elect. And the Lord will reward that number. So those fishers will be turned to those hunters. And as you have that saying, because right now Esau, Edom, is the hunter. But you have that saying where, the hunter becomes the hunted. So I should get that real quick. Because right now Esau, Edom's on top, but very soon he'll be brought low. Let's see. This is the hunter becomes the hunted. It describes a situation where someone who was initially pursuing or attacking others suddenly finds themselves being pursued or attacked, and the Lord's going to, flip the tables on this devil, man. As you see right here, it's effectively reversing the roles of the predator and prey. Because especially within the scriptures, be wise as serpents and harmless, as doves. But once the Lord flips that switch, the evils are finished, man. And it says, behold, I'll send for many fishers, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them, and after I'll send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them. This is the main point right here. And they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill and out the holes of the rocks. And we just read that in Revelations, the 6th chapter. We also went into in Amos, the 9th chapter, further going to that. And we read in this article is the kings of the earth will hide themselves. And it's prophecy, man. But, this devil will not be able to escape his judgment. He will pay. This is Psalms 2. Because he's going to be taken right up out of those bunkers and these different things and try to flee to and put right into chains, man. And this is Psalms 2:1 that says, why did heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? This devil thinks to be able to escape the wrath of the Lord. Job 14:5 to further add to that point, seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. So the devil is set to rule for a certain period of time. And guess what that time is ticking? This devil knows it. And that's why you also get in Revelation 12:12 going to, this great wrath that he's preparing to come to it. Preparing to come down with, because he knows that he has to put a short time. But what's in this devil thing, he'll be able to rule forever. It's getting scriptures how his inward thoughts as his houses. It's like that his house shall continue forever. So he thinks he'll be able to, go to these bunkers and, flee and hide away and come out when all the destruction and judgment has taken place. No. This is not one of your movies you saw. This is your Yahweh Shai movie, and we're giving you the spoilers as to what's getting ready to unfold, what's getting ready to take place. Because you see within... quick drink. Example of, Fallout. The show or, the game where you see a nuke go off, go into these bunkers, and after years have passed, then they will come out and rebuild this and that. No. He thinks he's gonna rise, as a phoenix from the dust. No. Because you can also get Isaiah 13. It goes on to show how devastating this destruction is going to be, this judgment that the Lord is going to unleash upon this place, especially upon Babylon the Great. Going back to Isaiah 13, how it will never be inhabited again. But as was Isaiah 34 and 1 through 5, to further go into this destruction that's coming, and what they're going to try to flee away from, as we especially read in Revelation 6 chapter, going to those stars falling from heaven. And those some tiny points together, the best of my ability. Now it says, come to your nations to hear and hearken, ye people at the earth hear, and all that is there in the world, and all things that come forth of it. Verse 2, for the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations, and their fury upon all their armies. He had utterly destroyed them, he had delivered them to the slaughter. Now verse 3, the slain also shall be cast out, and the stink shall come out of the carcasses, and the melt shall be melted with their blood. Great judgment is coming to this place, man. Especially to these devils, man. As well as the heathen nations, because they also played a role in the captivity of the nation of Israel. Matter of fact, you can get the scriptures going to how they have, came together to go against us. I was trying to remember the exact verse. One consent. Let's see if I find it. I believe the book of Psalms. Yeah, this is Psalms 83 and 5, just to get that point. Because you're also going to have these heathen nations, pay for things that they have done. As if they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. And it's just going to these nations, coming together to go against us, to keep us, under them, and it will list off even a few of those nations. Let's see. It says the tabernacles of Edom, so white people today, and the Ishmaelites, and the Arabs, and Moab, dealing with the Chinese. The list goes on. Let's go back to Isaiah 34. Now, it's verse 4. And all the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down as a leaf falls off from the vine, and falling fig from the fig tree. And we already broke down what the heaven be rolled together as a scroll to speak of, deal with the mushroom cloud. Now, verse 5, main point, for my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Idumea, no word for Esau, even upon the people my curse to judgment. So that sword is not speaking of a actual sword, but speaking of those thermonuclear missiles. As once again in various scriptures, Revelation 6 chapter, you're likening them to stars, falling from heaven. Jeremiah 50, going to those arrows, as well as 2nd Ezra, going to the same thing. Isaiah 95, going to how this war will be by the way of fuel and flame and fire. You also go back to Jeremiah 50 and go into the 25th verse. You're going to the Lord open up his armory against this place. You get another scripture how the Lord has given this devil the knowledge, to create the thermonuclear missile, the ICBM. The Lord has created the waster to destroy. So, these pieces should be, now starting to click. The scriptures now start to become, a whole lot clearer if you didn't get it already, Now we got, let's see, 2 more scriptures, and that'll be the point. This is Numbers chapter 35 and 33. Now it says, so ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. And who shed that blood? Esau, Edom. As well as these heathen nations, but mainly speaking of Esau. He's going to need to pay for the things that he's done. So these bunkers are not going to do him any good. Especially, went into a lesson just, say, a few hours ago, going into how the trust in this place, will be your demise. It will be your downfall, because many of our people fight tooth and nail, pushing for Esau even to be saved. And yet, look at all the atrocities that he has committed and things that he's done. He's going to pay for those things, man. And we read in Numbers 35 and 33, his blood is required. So he's especially not going to be able to escape, the wrath of Yahweh Bashmal Shai. So this is Ezekiel 35:5, the last scripture. And that's because thou hast had a perpetual hatred. And also further going more into that point, this devil has a perpetual hatred against us. And when you go into the word perpetual, means you're everlasting, you're forever, never ending. So he has an everlasting hatred against us, man, as you can also get Book of Genesis. He has kept that hatred since the beginning. And that's because I was had a perpetual hatred and had shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword. Genesis 27:39-40, especially going into his blessing, which was the fatness of the earth as well as the sword. This is by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. So I just wanted to get that point going to Numbers 35-33. How his blood is acquired, and it says right here, but by the blood of him that shed it. And, hey, who shed that blood? Esau, Edom. And I also brought point dealing with these heathen nations also, but mainly speaking of Esau, Edom. But that's pretty much the point right there. I want to make a quick lesson going to this article. Speaking on the situation, I made a few lessons going to similar things. We're gonna have these devils trying to escape their judgment, trying to flee and hide away, but the Lord has covered all routes of escape. You can try to see, you can try underground, these space stations, but there is nowhere you can go. So it will, prophecy will be, played out as it is written. And you devils are going to be taken right up out of those bunkers and bases that you have put straight into chains, man. So your judgment is coming. So you can, squeal and squirm and fight as hard as you can. But the Lord has his eyes set against you. And what's in your crimes need to be paid. So that's the point. Don't want to drag the lesson. Those are what ties points together. It's my ability to edify throughout this whole thing. I do and close out and give all praises, all honor, and all glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai Ba'Shem Kakadash and Shalom. See you next one, Lord will.